The road into St. Francisville wound narrow beneath the weight of ancient oaks. Their branches arched high overhead, weaving together in a canopy that let sunlight through in fractured beams. Spanish moss hung thick from the limbs, heavy as funeral drapery, swaying faintly in the late afternoon breeze. The air pressed humid against the car windows, warm and damp, carrying with it the smell of earth and water. Cicadas droned in relentless chorus, their calls swelling and breaking until it felt less like insects than the voice of the woods themselves. Charles drove with both hands tight on the wheel, his eyes following the winding strip of road as though it might vanish if he looked away. Beside him, Tina leaned toward the glass, her eyes fixed on the play of light through moss. The beams shifted as they drove, flashing bright, then dim, then gone, as though the forest breathed around them. In the back seat, Carson tapped his shoes softly against the leather, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat belonging to the road itself. The oaks parted, and there it stood. The Myrtles Plantation. White columns gleamed under the low sun, stark against the long shadows cast across the lawn. The veranda stretched wide, its rails wrapped in vine. The balconies above were half swallowed by shade, the light catching in patches across their dark wood. A handful of windows glowed faint, not with firelight, but with the dying sun, their panes reflecting gold like eyes half-lidded in watchfulness. Even in daylight, the house stood solemn, rooted to the ground with a presence that felt older than its age. It seemed less a place to live than a monument to what had already passed. The tires hissed across gravel as Charles pulled the car to a stop. The other visitors gathered near the steps, a handful of strangers blotting their brows against the heat, their faces damp with the sweat of late summer. The guide waited in the doorway, tall and gray-haired, his features framed by shadow. When he spoke, his voice was low, deliberate, the cadence of a man who knew silence was as important as words. "You stand at one of America's most haunted homes," he said. "Every board remembers. Every wall listens. The Myrtles Plantation is not kind to forgetting." He began with Chloe. She wore her turban always, green to cover the ear that was taken. She had been punished, caught where she should not have been, listening. Desperate to find her way back, she baked a cake. Oleander leaves crushed fine, mixed with sugar, folded into batter. Perhaps she meant only a lesson, but it became an ending instead. The children ate. Their laughter was quieted forever. Chloe's spirit, they say, walks still, not for revenge, not for anger, but for forgiveness that never came. The group shifted uncomfortably. One woman crossed her arms, another rubbed at her wrist as though chilled despite the heat. The guide's voice lowered further. "And William Drew Winter, gunned down in 1871 on his own porch. He staggered inside. With each step, he left a mark. He climbed 1, 2, 10, 15, and on the 17th, he fell. Death met him there and no higher. They say his footsteps have never stopped. They rise again and again, but never past the 17th. The visitors glanced to the staircase beyond, each unwilling to be the first to look away. Finally, the guide gestured toward the great mirror that dominated the foyer. Morning brought cloths for mirrors. Cover them, lest a soul be caught. But this mirror was not covered soon enough. And so the children linger. Faces press the glass, hands leave their smears. They are waiting. The heavy door closed and the light dimmed behind it. Inside, the foyer air was cooler, but pressed close. The scent of beeswax polish mingled with dust, with the faintest sweetness of flowers that had long since died. The grand staircase swept upward with authority, its rail dark and gleaming. Beside it, the mirror loomed tall, its edges fogged as though something inside had breathed against it. Portraits lined the walls, The Winters, oil on canvas, gazes solemn, eyes that seem to track the group with patient delay. The guide spoke of William's final climb, and from above the boards creaked. Once, then again, measured, heavy, deliberate. The group stilled. One visitor muttered softly, then fell silent. They moved into the dining room. The long table stretched from one end of the chamber to the other, wood scarred and cut by decades of use. Tarnished silver lay across it, dulled to gray. Tall windows spilled light across the floorboards, striping them with gold. Candles flickered faintly in their holders, flames bowing and twisting though the windows were shut tight. The guide retold Chloe's tale. He lingered on the image of the cake, of children gathered around the table, of laughter that had filled the house once and never again. As his words faded, a sound rose from beneath the table, a laugh, high, small, quick as breath. The group gasped together. One woman pulled her feet onto her chair. Another clutched at her skirt. Charles's face tightened, his jaw set, but his eyes slid toward the shadows under the tablecloth. The sitting room held the weight of silence. Velvet sofas slumped in dust. Rugs clung faintly to their patterns, worn nearly smooth. The fireplace yawned black, its soot long since settled. Above the portraits pressed downward, William Winter's gaze painted with a sharpness that unsettled. "He paces here still," the guide said. The floor groaned in answer. One board, then another. Steps pressed heavy and slow, measured in silence, though no one moved. Upstairs, the air clung heavier. Beds sagged, lavender lingered faint and stubborn. Mirrors, warped by age, bent shadows wrong. Tina leaned close to one, her reflection blurred, stretched thin, then returned. For a moment, another seemed to stand just behind her shoulder. She turned sharply. Nothing. The guide's voice was calm. "Children haunt this floor. They tug at skirts. They laugh in corners. They leave marbles, ribbons, coins. The Myrtles Plantation has not let them go." The hallway narrowed. Portraits crowded close. Candles lined the wall, their light faint, unsteady. One flame sputtered, bent low, then died. Another followed. Smoke curled upward, gray and thin. Silence pressed in. Then, the patter of bare feet. Light, quick, darting across the boards. Tina gasped as her skirt tugged sharply. A whisper brushed her ear, too faint for words, too near to ignore. The group hurried back to the foyer. The air there pressed heavier, thick and waiting. The great mirror shimmered faintly, its surface stirring as though water lay just behind the glass. And then it came, a scrape, slow, grating across the rustic wood floor. From the shadow at the base of the staircase, a stone rolled into view, smooth, gray, veined pale. It dragged itself forward with sound far larger than its size. The scrape continued, deliberate, until the stone struck against Carson's shoe with a soft, final tap. Gasps filled the foyer. The guide faltered, his throat caught, voice trembling. "I've never seen this before." The silence deepened, folding around them, heavy and alive. At last, the guide urged them to the door. Outside, the air was no lighter. The heat still clung, though the day's last light stretched thin across the lawn. Long shadows reached from the oaks. Spanish moss glowed faint in the sunset. Tina turned once at the steps. The Myrtles Plantation stood white against the dying day, its windows shining faint with reflection. It did not move. It did not need to. It only watched. And as the guide had said at the start, so it seemed true now, the Myrtles Plantation always speaks. It is only a question of when.